A few years ago, I was driving home from a friend's wedding, cutting through a stretch of highway in rural Tennessee that I had never driven before. It was well past midnight, and the road was nearly deserted, just dark asphalt stretching endlessly ahead, flanked by dense forests on both sides. The only company I had was my own headlights bouncing off the reflective road signs and the occasional 18-wheeler roaring past in the opposite direction. I wasn't particularly tired, but there was something about that road that made me feel uneasy. Then I saw the exit sign. It was one of those old green highway markers, the kind that are lit by a single flickering light above. Exit 96, Duncan Road. I didn't remember seeing it on my GPS. In fact, I was pretty sure there wasn't supposed to be an exit for another 15 miles. But the gas station icon below the sign caught my attention. I checked my fuel gauge, half a tank left. I didn't need gas, but I figured I'd stop, stretch my legs, maybe grab a coffee to keep myself alert. I signaled and veered onto the exit ramp. That was my first mistake. The ramp curved sharply, much longer than I expected. It felt like I had been looping downward forever. The trees rising high on either side, swallowing the road. My GPS screen glitched, the map freezing for a moment before flashing. No route found. A weird sense of dread settled in my gut. I wasn't lost, was I? Then, finally, I reached the bottom of the ramp and rolled up to a small, run-down gas station. It was the only building in sight. No houses, no businesses, just miles of darkness behind me and this single gas station ahead. It looked abandoned. The lights inside were on, but the windows were clouded with dust. The old-fashioned pumps out front had those flip number displays, the kind you don't see anymore. I pulled up beside the pump and shut off the engine. That's when I noticed it. There were no cars. Not a single vehicle parked in the lot. No one fueling up. And yet, the station was open. The door hung slightly ajar, swinging gently in the breeze. Something about that door bothered me. It wasn't welcoming. It felt like an invitation. I hesitated. Maybe I should just leave. I still had half a tank, and this place didn't feel right. Then a voice crackled through the old speaker above the pump. Go inside. I flinched, my pulse spiking. The speaker was ancient, rusted with age. There was no visible camera, no sign of an attendant. The voice sounded too flat, too hollow, like a recording. I glanced at the door again. It had stopped moving. A shiver crawled down my spine. I didn't go inside. Instead, I got back in my car, locking the doors as I turned the key in the ignition. The engine didn't start. Nothing. No click. No turnover. Just silence. My breath hitched. I turned the key again. Still nothing. That's when I saw movement. Inside the gas station. A figure. Standing behind the counter, just barely visible through the grimy window. I hadn't seen anyone when I pulled up, but now, a tall, motionless man stood behind the register, facing me. Then, the lights inside the station flickered. And for a split second, I saw his face. Or rather, I didn't. There was nothing. Just smooth, pale skin stretched over a skull. No eyes. No nose. No mouth. The lights flickered again, and he was closer. I turned the key one last time. The engine roared to life. I slammed the gas pedal, my tires screeching against the pavement as I tore out of the lot. My headlights swung wildly, illuminating the trees as I sped back toward the exit ramp. The ramp, however, was gone. There was only a dirt path leading into the woods. My stomach dropped. That wasn't the road I had come down, but I didn't have a choice. I floored it, bouncing over uneven ground as I plunged into the dark forest. My GPS screen flickered wildly, glitching between maps of places I didn't recognize. Then, without warning, I was back on the highway. 1 second, I was tearing through trees. The next, my car skidded onto smooth pavement. I gasped, struggling to regain control. The exit was gone. I checked my mirrors, my heart hammering. No sign of the gas station, just empty road stretching behind me. My GPS had reset, showing my original route. No detour, no Duncan Road. I kept driving, refusing to stop until I reached a busy truck stop an hour later. When I got out, my legs nearly gave out beneath me. I felt sick, my head spinning. Then, as I reached for my phone to check the time, I froze. I had lost 2 hours. Somehow, a trip that should have taken 5 minutes had taken me into a place that didn't exist. I tried looking up Duncan Road later. It wasn't on any map. No records. No old town listings. Nothing. But I know what I saw. And sometimes, when I'm driving late at night, I see a flickering green highway sign in the distance. Exit 96, Duncan Road. I never stop, and I never look back. I used to drive a stretch of highway in West Virginia late at night for work. It was the kind of road that felt more like a deserted back road than an actual highway. Narrow lanes, no streetlights, barely any traffic. Most of the time, I was the only car on the road for miles. One night, I was heading home around 2 a.m., exhausted but alert enough to drive. The road was quiet, with only the occasional truck passing in the opposite direction. The only thing breaking the silence was the steady hum of my engine and the rhythmic bumps of my tires rolling over the cracks in the pavement. Then, up ahead, I saw it. A man standing on the overpass above the road. He wasn't just walking across it. He was standing completely still, right at the edge, facing the highway. I slowed down slightly, my stomach tightening. I don't know why, but something about him felt wrong. His posture was unnatural, too rigid, too stiff, like a mannequin placed at the edge of the bridge. His face was obscured by shadows, even though my headlights should have caught at least part of it. He didn't move. He didn't even seem to be breathing. I drove under the overpass, craning my neck to get a better look. But as soon as I passed beneath him, he was gone. I checked my rearview mirror. Nothing. My heart started pounding. There was no way he could have moved that fast. No way. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe he had stepped back before I passed. But then, half a mile later, I saw him again, standing on the next overpass. Same posture, same unnatural stillness. He was waiting for me. I slammed the gas pedal, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I had no explanation for what I was seeing, but I knew I couldn't stop. I kept driving, gripping the wheel so tightly my fingers ached. Every mile, every overpass. He was there. Always the same stance. Always the same faceless silhouette watching me. By the fifth overpass, I was on the verge of a breakdown. My whole body was trembling, and my vision blurred from the stress. I just wanted to get off this highway. Then, my radio cut out. The music died abruptly, replaced by a low, garbled whispering. My blood turned to ice. It wasn't static. It was words, but they weren't in English. They weren't in any language I recognized. A deep, inhuman voice, whispering just beneath the surface of my own thoughts. I shut the radio off. The whispering didn't stop. I realized then, it wasn't coming from the radio. It was coming from inside the car. I didn't look in the mirror. I didn't want to see if he was in the back seat. I just kept driving. At some point, the whispering stopped. I don't know when. All I know is that by the time I saw the first gas station in miles, I swerved into the parking lot, skidding to a stop. I stumbled out, gasping for air, feeling like I had just survived something I wasn't meant to. The attendant inside must have noticed my pale face because he immediately asked if I was okay. I told him what I had seen. He didn't look surprised. He just nodded slowly and said, "You should never drive that road alone at night." I didn't ask why. I didn't want to know. But I never took that route again. A few years ago, I was driving across Arizona, making my way home from a visit to an old college friend. It was late, probably close to midnight, and I was in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by miles of flat desert highway with nothing but the occasional gas station breaking up the emptiness. I wasn't worried. I had a full tank, a charged phone, and my music blasting through the speakers to keep me awake. The road stretched endlessly ahead, bathed in moonlight, and there were no cars in sight, just me and the open desert. Then I saw headlights appear in my rearview mirror. At first, I barely noticed. Just another driver, probably another late-night traveler like me. The car was far behind, just a pair of distant lights hovering in the dark. But then I realized the headlights weren't getting any closer. They stayed the same exact distance behind me, for miles. I checked my speedometer. I was doing 70, maybe 75. If they were driving the same speed, why weren't they gaining on me? Why weren't they falling behind? I kept glancing back. The headlights never wavered. Not once. Not even a slight shift, as if they were adjusting their position. Just two perfectly round lights, locked onto me like eyes. A slow, uneasy feeling started creeping into my stomach. I told myself it was just a coincidence. Maybe they had their cruise control set exactly like mine. Maybe they were tired and keeping their distance out of caution. But deep down, I knew something was off. I decided to test them. I slowed down, just a little, dropped to 65. The headlights slowed too. I sped up. 80, 85. They matched me. Not instantly, not in a natural way. They adjusted perfectly, as if they knew. My hands clenched the wheel. My mouth went dry. This wasn't normal. And then, they turned off. Just like that. Gone. No car behind me. No lights. Just total darkness stretching out in my rearview mirror. My pulse pounded in my ears. There was no way they could have turned off the road. There weren't any exits. No side streets. Just desert. I kept checking the mirror, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. Where did they go? Then, after about a minute, the headlights came back. Closer. Much closer. I let out a strangled gasp. They were right on my bumper. I hadn't seen them approach. I hadn't seen them turn back on. 1 second, they were gone. The next, they were inches from my car. Blinding. Overpowering. Filling my rearview mirror with an impossible, burning light. Panic took over. I slammed the gas pedal, pushing my car as fast as it would go. My speedometer climbed past 90, 95, 100. The headlights stayed right behind me. I could feel the vibrations from their engine, but I couldn't hear it. No revving, no tires skidding against the asphalt. Just silence except for my own racing heartbeat. Then, they started flashing. On, off, on, off. Like a message. Like a warning. I tried to think. Should I pull over? Should I call for help? But my phone was frozen. The screen wouldn't turn on. Dead, even though I had just charged it. The lights grew impossibly bright. I squinted, nearly blinded. My hands slick with sweat on the steering wheel. And then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, they vanished. I let out a choked gasp. My car was still flying down the highway, the engine roaring, my tires barely gripping the road. But when I checked the mirror, there was nothing there. No car, no lights, just the empty desert stretching into the night. I took the first exit I could find and pulled into a gas station, my entire body shaking. The attendant inside looked at me with concern as I stumbled through the door. "You okay, man?" I hesitated. "Yeah, some car was following me." But it disappeared. The attendant's face darkened. He set down the newspaper he had been reading and leaned forward. "You were on Highway 160, weren't you?" My stomach dropped. "Yeah. Why?" He sighed. "Happens sometimes. People see those lights. They don't always come back." I stared at him, my mouth suddenly dry. "Come back?" I echoed. He didn't answer. Just shook his head and muttered, "You're lucky you didn't stop." I never took that route again. And sometimes, on dark roads, when I glance in my mirror, I swear I still see those lights. Watching. Waiting.